Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, Implementing NDIS Reform with Confidence, from setting goals to what's reasonable and necessary. The NDIS continues to evolve, and I know you don't need me to spell that one out. We can all see the landscape shifting. With these changes comes an increased focus on understanding not only what supports are being delivered, but also why they're needed, how they relate to a participant's disability or impairment, and how they contribute to outcomes and goals achieved. Today, we'll unpack what these changes mean in practice and share some simple, practical strategies that you can apply in your day-to-day role. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be shared with all attendees after the session. We've also enabled the Q&A function. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please pop them in the Q&A box. Our team will be monitoring questions during the session and will respond where possible. We're looking forward to spending the next hour with you, so let's get started. Plan Partners acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the land where we live and work. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and communities, and pay our respects to elders past and present. We're committed to working together to create a more inclusive Australia where everyone matters. For those who don't know me, I'm Amanda Winslade, the Business Relationship Manager for New South Wales here at Plan Partners, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. I'm really looking forward to taking you through today's session and introducing our guest speaker, Yosmeris Aparicio Quincas, who'll be sharing practical insights into what implementing the NDIS reform looks like in practice. I'd also like to introduce Justine, our State Relationship Manager for South Australia and Western Australia, Susanna and Adam, our Business Relationship Managers for Queensland, and Natasha, our State Relationship Manager for Victoria, who will be moderating the chat and helping us behind the scenes throughout the webinar. They'll be answering questions where they can and sharing helpful resources and making sure any questions we don't get to are captured for follow-up. You'll also hear from Justine a little later in today's session, and she'll be taking us through the latest pricing changes and some of the key updates providers should be aware of. Now, I'd love to introduce you to Yoz. Yoz is the founder of Supporting Communities Australia and creator of Elevate Youth Lab. With 8 years of experience across the NDIS, child protection and out-of-home care sectors, Yoz is passionate about helping young people build practical skills and achieve greater independence. Based in Western Sydney, Yoz works closely with young people, families, and multidisciplinary teams to turn NDIS goals into real measurable outcomes. You'll hear from Yoz throughout today's webinar, where she'll be sharing practical examples, insights, and strategies. Welcome, Yoz. Thanks so much for taking the time to join our webinar today.
Thank you, Amanda, for that amazing introduction. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of the day to be here. I know how busy we all are in the sector, and I can assure you that I don't take your time lightly.
Yoz, if there was one thing you hope people would take away from today's session, what would it be?
I would say I would want people to walk away with clarity, because when providers are clear on why a support exists, who's it for, and what it's building towards, everything else just flows. The documentation gets better, the outcomes get stronger, and the participants actually move forward. So I would say clarity, 100%.
And you've worked in the front line for a number of years now. What's one thing you wish every support worker understood about the impact they can have on a participant's progress?
That they have the power to change someone's life. Not eventually, not in theory, not even in the future. They have that power every day when they are providing supports. From the way that they show up it affects the participants' confidence, their communication skills, even down the line, the ability to hold down a job. So if you can help them to better navigate the system, that impact can be enormous, but it has to be intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to actually walk in knowing what you're building and why, and that starts even before you arrive at the door.
Perfect. Thanks, Yoz. And with that in mind, let's go over to today's agenda, and I'll walk you through a few things that we'll be covering. First, we're going to look at what changes are being made in the NDIS, what those changes mean in practice, and how providers can demonstrate the value and impact of the supports they're delivering. Yoz will then bring this to life with some practical examples. And then we'll have Justine take us through the pricing schedule, STA, and the proposed implementation timeline. And then we'll wrap up with plenty of time for your questions. So a little bit about Plan Partners. We started in 2017 with just 4 people in a small office in Blacktown, Sydney. Today, we support thousands of NDIS participants, providers and support coordinators across Australia through our plan management and support coordination services. We're committed to supporting the sector through practical resources, education and local engagement. Our dedicated relationship managers work with providers across Australia, delivering face-to-face and online education sessions, helping keep the sector informed, connected and confident in navigating the NDIS. We all know that there's been some significant changes across the NDIS recently, and keeping up with those changes can feel quite overwhelming. And that's why we're here today. Our goal is to help make some of those changes easier to understand, so you feel more confident in your role and can focus on what matters most, supporting participants. As a quick reminder, today's webinar provides general information and practical guidance based on our understanding of the NDIS environment. While we are not the NDIA and we do not influence policy or funding decisions, we are committed to sharing clear, practical and up-to-date information to support your work. So before we dive into it, let's talk about why the reform is happening. The NDIS has grown incredibly quickly, and with that growth have come some challenges. The goal of the reform isn't to make life harder for providers, although sometimes it can feel that way. It's about making sure the scheme is sustainable and that participants are protected and funding is going where it's intended. When we understand the why, the what becomes much clearer. The reform isn't about catching providers out, it's about raising the standard across our sector. Yoz, how do you see these reforms improving outcomes while supporting NDIS sustainability? Okay, I think we're having a bit of a technical glitch.
I forgot to unmute myself.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so like I was saying, I think the reform is actually bringing us back to the NDIS original purpose, because I think we've lost sight of that. One thing that is important to remember is that the NDIS is an insurance scheme, and it's always to build capacity, increase independence, and ultimately reduce reliance on funded supports over time. If we're doing our jobs well, we should be able to work ourselves out of a job. The rapid growth that we've seen has put real pressure in the scheme's sustainability. And I don't think these changes are trying to protect it. And I do think that these changes are trying to protect it from the people that are forgetting that a little bit. So do I think this is a perfect process? No, but I always choose to be an optimist. And if we stay focused on the outcomes, on building capacity and on doing what the NDIS was actually designed to do, the reform is just working towards maintaining that sustainability. And I know that might feel opposite to what we are all experiencing right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest shifts is moving from asking, can I claim this, to asking, can I justify this? Every support we deliver should have a clear purpose. Can we explain why it's needed? Does it relate to the participant's disability or impairment? And is it working towards helping them reach their goals? We also need to know what outcomes we're expecting to see. If the answer to all this is yes, and we have evidence to support it, we're on the right track. Yours, do you see this shift from claiming to justifying as a positive change?
I do see it as a positive change. I know it's not as simple as saying we need to progress and we need to be able to work ourselves out of a job. There is participants that will always need supports, but we always have to work within our scope to increase capacity. Why do I think it's justifying it's a positive change? When you have to justify a support, you have to think about the support itself differently. You move away from what you did to what changed because you did it. That shift in thinking is what actually drives the real outcome. And I believe, and it's been my own experience, that that can only be good for the people that we support.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things is understanding impairment. And this is one of the areas that often causes confusion. A diagnosis on its own doesn't determine what support someone receives. It's the impact that disability has on a person's everyday life that matters. And as providers, we need to understand how that impairment affects the participant and make sure our supports are directly linked to those functional impacts. Funding is driven by functional impairment, not diagnosis alone. What matters is how the condition affects the person's ability to live as independently as possible. And that's all different things, how they communicate, emotional regulation, how to regulate emotions, manage daily activities, participate in community, and complete their own personal care tasks. Yours, how can providers better link supports to a participant's functional needs?
I think you can start with what's happening on the day, like what is the current reality, and not just the diagnosis. What can this participant not do today because of the disability? That's your functional need. And every support you deliver to that participant needs to be able to trace it directly. So if your notes never mention the word independence and the participant's goals say build independence, there's obviously a gap. So if you start mentioning that in your notes, you're definitely starting to close that gap.
Yeah, and we've seen the conversation is changing from how many hours we provide support for to what difference those hours make. We need to be able to show progress. Has the participant become more independent? Have they learned a new skill? Are they more connected to the community? Those are the outcomes that matter. It's important that we understand how to measure participants' progress. Knowing where a participant starts helps us accurately track their journey and outcomes. Without a clear baseline, reports may suggest that progress has been stagnant, when in reality, the participant has achieved a positive change over time. Now I'm going to hand you over to Yoz, where she can show you a demonstration on how to apply this in practice.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So one of the things that I kept seeing in my work was that we are doing amazing work, like genuinely life-changing stuff. But when we're writing notes, I see it a lot, reports that say, or notes that said support provided no concerns. And I kept thinking, we're actually leaving a lot of information on the table. So that's why I developed the reach test, which is a 60-second self-check that I use myself on my notes. And it's not about adding more paperwork. It's actually being intentional about the paperwork that you're doing. So let me walk you through what each letter of reach means. So we have A, which is related to the disability. So every support that you deliver, you need to document it. You need to document it in a way that connects it back to the participant's functional impairment, not the diagnosis, their impairment. And what is it about the disability that means that they need that support right now? E is for everyday functional impact. What is the real world skill or activity that you're working on? You need to be specific about this. Just writing community access is not good enough anymore. Navigating a supermarket independently, that is specific. So the more specific you are, the stronger your evidence will be. A is for achievement or outcome. What did they actually do or learn? What changed, even if it was just a little bit? Because those small wins need to be named. If you can't name a change, ask yourself what you're actually measuring against. C is for current evidence. What did you observe? What did the participants say? What did the family member, teacher, or allied professional report? Your observation is evidence. Use it. And H is for how STA and NDIS support. This is the one that catches most people out. You need to be able to say, this is a disability-related skill building, and it's not something that another service or system like a school, healthcare, or family is responsible for providing. If your notes answers all of those 5 things, you are protecting yourself, your organization, and actually, ultimately, the participants' funds. Now, we're going to move on to mention a case study that I brought to you guys today to put Rich to the test. So the case study that we're going to go through is Let's Go Shopping. The participants' goal in the plan is build independence and confidence in running a household. The activity that we chose for this case study is your regular weekly shopping. So a note, and we see this a lot, it's not a surprise. A note for this for the support for this service can be support a participant with grocery shopping completed. No incidents. Well, that's not good enough. We're leaving a lot of information on the table. So what actually happened during that outing? The participant could have located 5 items from the shopping list without prompting. They could have engaged a staff member to ask them where they could find an item instead of actually relying on the support worker. They could have chosen between 2 products based on price. They could have paid at the self-checkout independently because you've been working towards that. And they could have initiated a conversation with a person that was not the support worker that came with them. So if we can transition from only saying supported participant with grocery shopping completing, and we can look into integrating all of these components, we would be doing much better case reports that actually tell a story for the participants' progress.
You're right, yours. Documentation isn't just paperwork. It's a story that shows the supports you've provided. Good notes explain what happened, why it happened, and what changed. If someone else picked up that file, would they understand the participant's journey? That's the new standard we're aiming for. When NDIS was first implemented, it was outcome driven, and somehow we've become a little lost along the way. But we're putting the pieces back together slowly. It's often the small details that tell the story best. So yours, can you show us what this looks like in an actual case note?
Of course, Amanda. I have here if you can give me the next slide, please. Now, if we implement the rich check to the notes about the things that the participant would have completed during the outing, we would be able to relate to the disability This participant's disability makes it hard to follow multiple steps at once, move around new places confidently, handling money, decisions on the spot. The support is directly linked to those challenges. So everyday functional impact, the session focuses on a real life skill, the weekly grocery shopping. This included finding items, comparing prices, paying independently, and talking to people on the store. There were measurable outcomes. The participant found items without being told where to go. They asked store workers where they could find, they engaged store workers to assist them navigate the shop instead of relying on the support worker. They can compare products, and they use the checkout independently, and they started a conversation. Now, the current evidence, the C, is the support worker watched all of this happening. So in the past sessions, the participant could have not been able to choose between 2 items, and after repetition, they got to that point. And lastly, H, how is it a NDIS support? This is a skill building that a young person needs because of the disability. Without this particular support, they would have not been able to independently do it. So school, an allied health provider, and even a family member probably won't actively teach them or support them to complete this, but the support worker can definitely do it. And after we identify all of these things within your session, you can go from, I will put here a before and after on the notes, and only by looking at the images, you can see how you went from supporting participant with grocery shopping completing to a full case note that reflects directly all of the topics that we outline in the reach check. And the commission would really value this type of note instead of just saying we did grocery shopping, because that's definitely not good enough for the commission standards now.
Thanks so much, Yoz, for that explanation and showing us how to clearly demonstrate the impacts our support has on a participant's progress. It's a great way to keep our documentation focused and ensure we're consistently capturing meaningful outcomes. Now, I'm going to hand you over to Justine, who will take us through the proposed implementation timeline, the pricing schedule. Justine will also explain what these changes mean in practice and the key dates to be aware of moving forward. Justine, are you there?
I am, Amanda.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, so my job today, guys, is to go through the post-July 1 price changes, and then also a couple of the significant changes that are currently occurring, not just from the pricing schedule, but also it's the continued rollout of the 2024 amendments, and also some commission activities. So what we'll start off with is the pricing schedule, Amanda.
Yeah, so we've seen how there's been some changes in the way that the price guide is published at the moment. Can you explain a little bit about why this has occurred?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very much it's a pretty hectic year, isn't it, Amanda? So the reason the NDIS pricing schedule has been published in the way that it has, or the manner that it has, is that it was published alongside the passage of the bill through Parliament. So the Securing the NDIS for Future Generations bill is still with Parliament, and it's having some delays back and forth. It certainly didn't pass by the end of the financial year. And amongst other things, the bill proposes to amend the Act to provide the Minister for the NDIS with the power to make a pricing determination. And they would set out the maximum amount or the method for determining that maximum amount. So for an NDIS support. So what this means is that the NDIS almost takes a back seat in determining pricing arrangements for NDIS supports, and the Minister takes the wheel. The NDIS becomes an advisor to the Minister, but ultimately the intention, if the bill does go through in the way that it is that the Minister will make pricing decisions into the future. So what we have at the moment is a skeleton pricing schedule, not a PAPL, not a price guide, and with no claim rules published alongside this pricing schedule.
A lot of changes to look at. So can you show us some of the changes to the actual pricing that occurred?
Yeah, so every year we get a bit of a bump or a decrease to some of the maximum cap limits that NDIS providers can charge to agency managed and plan managed participants. So this year we've seen an increase in psychology to $252.99 an hour, and we've seen a decrease for dietitians, exercise physiologists, and other professionals. And the reason we've seen this adjustment in into price caps, is the external benchmarking that the NDIS, or the annual pricing review, has performed, and they have compared it to the Medicare benefit schedule and private health insurance. So they have lined what the NDIS maximum cap rates are with what is charged under Medicare and private health. Other professionals is a little bit tricky because it's a reasonably broad category, and so the APR could not align that with any specific registration or professional status. So that has had a significant dip down to $156.16 an hour.
Quite a lot to get your head around. But what are some of the other shifts that we're seeing?
Yeah, well, every year, Amanda, the APR and the disability support worker cost model do make recommendations around the maximum maximum price limits for support workers. So they have received an increase with a return margin to the business of 2%, anticipated. And so that's definitely in the new pricing schedule, but just a bit of a heads up for people who are running core support businesses to keep your eye on what the SHADS award is doing on the 1st of October. It won't affect all core support providers, but it will affect a good portion of the people that are working in our community. So those businesses need to be aware that there is an anticipated 15% increase to people in the SHADS award who are considered Schedule E employees. Now, that's not something that we are involved in at all. So, but just have a look at the award and have a look at some of the conversations around that. But that's something to be preparing for the 1st of October. In terms of NDIS pricing schedule, we've also seen an orientation and mobility specialist line item inserted into the pricing schedule. That's predominantly for the vision impaired community.
Yeah, and they threw something else at us this year. We've seen some additional line items in therapy. What is that all about?
We have, and that threw some therapy providers into a spin. I think we're all spinning. So what's happened for this year is that the NDIS essentially would like to have more visibility and oversight as to what allied health therapists are charging. So instead of one line item, which is a direct service line item that could be used for cancellations, non-face-to-face, etc., we now have 6, I think, line items for say for physiotherapy or speech pathology. So you will have direct service line item, you'll have cancellation, non-face-to-face, you'll have telehealth, how am I going here? You have travel, and you'll have report writing. So allied health therapists are expected to be, and direct service allied health therapists are expected to be invoicing underneath those new suffixes on their line items.
Yeah, and a few other big ones that we're going through today is STA and SIL. Justine, are you ready to tackle these changes?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so we've had the SIL changes we've known about for a little while, but we'll look at STA first. So what happened with STA? It's been something that the NDIS has been actively managing, we could say nicely, for the last 2 or so years. In last October, the NDIS changed the term short-term accommodation to short-term respite, and now we've flipped back to short-term accommodation as of July this year. Apparently in response to the feedback around the word respite, which is completely fair enough. But the big thing in addition to a name change is the fact that we have unbundled line items. So pre-July 1, a short-term accommodation provider could charge a package price per day. And that depended on weekday, weekend, public holiday. So let's say, for example, a weekday daytime package rate for short-term accommodation pre-July 1 was $2,178.57. Post-July 1, short-term accommodation providers can only charge for short-term for the accommodation component for the participant and the support worker if necessary, and then the support worker hours, and that's it. Nothing more. No package price, 2 unbundled or 3 unbundled line items. What we've seen is that some providers weren't ahead of this change, and I don't think we actually had that much time to get used to that change, and so they are still invoicing under the old short-term accommodation line items, and they are being rejected by the NDIS. So any post-July 1 service delivery for short-term accommodation need to be using the new line items. And we've also seen that that's actually flown some providers into a bit of a flurry, the ones that were quoting for post-July 1 services. But they were quoting pre-July 1, they've had to go back and re-quote because we can't process the invoices as they stood from pre-July 1. So there has been, a lot of activity around this. We're getting used to the fact that we have to keep our eye on short-term accommodation because it does keep changing, and what's in and what's out, etc., has changed considerably, and who can have what and who can't have what has changed over the last couple of years. But what we've set it on now for the moment, because I feel like there will be some further conversations around this, is that short-term accommodation is literally just the accommodation and just the support worker hours. So that excludes meals, transport, and activities. Previously, I presume that a short-term accommodation provider was able to fit some of those services in their package price and still comfortably say sustainable. You can't hide that anywhere in the new fee structure. So yeah, virtually impossible to incorporate into your short-term accommodation fees. And I guess that some of the conversations that are being had is that it's an unrealistic expectation for a participant to take their own food to a short-term accommodation provider. And there's all sorts of other, I'm sure there's all sorts of other issues around that in terms of hygiene and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So very much a watch this space situation, but that is how the pricing schedule is currently set. Eligibility hasn't really changed that much for people accessing short-term accommodation. To have STA funding, you need to be a person with disability who lives with or gets daily drop-in support from a primary informal support for more than 6 hours a day on a long-term basis. But then you also need to satisfy one of these other dot points. So you need to receive either high-intensity support, have an intensive or complex positive behaviour support need, have a specialist behaviour intervention support need. You might live in an area where alternate in-home supports aren't widely available and accessible, or your informal support's well-being and capacity to continue their caring role is at risk, or that person has additional caring responsibilities. If you tick those boxes, then potentially you're eligible for short-term accommodation funding at the same 14 days and 28 days, which has been in place for a while now. So as I said, what we have seen around plan partners is that pre-July 1 quotes need to be requoted by the service provider. We're seeing bulk amounts funded in plans with no ratios. So in an NDIS plan, you will see words to something like, you have $37,600 to spend on short-term accommodation. So there doesn't seem to be a lot, for some plans, there doesn't seem to be a lot of additional explanation around that short-term accommodation, which could either be a good or a bad thing, probably good. We're still seeing a lot of providers sending us invoices that are going to be rejected by the NDIS. And now we're beginning to see some duplicated support hours on an invoice. So you need to be able to substantiate why there is a duplicate support hour on your invoice. As for SIL, because I'm on a roll here, Amanda, I might as well just keep on soldiering on. For SIL, this is something that goes back a couple of years. And it's a well-known fact that mandatory registration for SIL providers is ongoing from the 1st of July. We've seen that new practice standards have been published for SIL providers, and any new provider of SIL is audited against these practice standards. Any currently registered SIL provider will be audited against these practice standards when their next audit comes up. There is a new registration code 0138 for registered SIL providers, and we're actually seeing some of those come through and being invoiced now. So we've still got the old SIL line items, which are still very current, but we have the new SIL line items, which is this 0138 as opposed to 0115. We are definitely processing both of those. What we are going to see by the 1st of October is that any SIL provider who was providing SIL prior to the 1st of July, who is unregistered, they need to show that they have applied for registration as of the 1st of October, or be registered as of the 1st of October. And if they're not registered or can't show that they have applied to be registered, they can no longer provide SIL. Any registered SIL provider will have that 0138 registration code applied to their registration. So they don't really need to do, registered SIL providers don't really need to do anything at the moment until they come up for their next audit. So that's it's a big thing for providers of SIL, particularly unregistered providers of SIL. And it's also a big thing for participants who are currently using an unregistered provider if they haven't had that conversation with their provider yet. Just another side note, we are still seeing a lot of overspend in SIL occurring. So that's still definitely, it's definitely a thing. It could be either over-servicing or underfunded plans, but we are still seeing it, and the NDIS is getting tougher and tougher on allowing that to happen. So
They
that's the
absolutely
changes.
are.
Sorry?
I said they absolutely are.
Yeah, they absolutely are. I know there'll be questions around STA and SIL, so please do chuck them in the Q&A, and we will try and answer them to the best of our ability. But like I said, this is still so new. We are still only just now receiving invoices for STA in particular from the 1st of July, so we are still generating a bank, I guess you could say, of knowledge on our end. But you know, we are able to support where we can. So yeah, that's the STA and SIL changes, Amanda.
Yeah, and if that wasn't enough to go over, we're now going to go over the proposed timeline of the major NDIS changes. Are you ready, Justine?
Yeah, I'm ready. I don't know if everybody else is ready.
Okay, let's go.
Look, I'm not going to go over all of these, guys, so you're more than welcome to snip them. We are sending a recording of this this webinar post the event. It has been signed off by my lovely friend Laura Schutz, so you all know her as Laura J. She said, yeah, it looks good, Justine, but I did have the date wrong somewhere. So she's done a little bit of oversight over this. There's so much activity, guys, and it's not just coming from one source. So I think I'll preface it with half of this stuff is contingent on the Act actually going through in the manner in which it's been presented to Parliament. It has been, accepted by Labor and Liberal. So that's, that's that. We do have, both Pocock and the Greens doing their best to have an impact on the wording of some of this amendment. But these scheduled dates, they might shift because the Act itself, the amendment itself is actually being pushed out a little bit. They might shift, they might disappear, or they could stay the same. So as it is today, we won't go over the STA and SIL. That started on the 1st of July. Interestingly, on the 9th of July this month, the Technical Advisory Group had their first meeting. Now, this Technical Advisory Group actually comes into play with eligibility from 2028 onwards, but they're already meeting. And they're already meeting while the bill's still in Parliament. But they're meeting because they were funded out of the budget. So it's all these other little things that are sort of interplaying that is creating the environment that we're working in. So they came together already. What they're going to do is discuss functional capacity assessment criteria and thresholds for eligibility. They're all eligibility. So that, from what I can understand, there's actually going to end up being 2 assessment tools. One to get in to the NDIS in the first place, and then the other for when you are reassessed. That's my understanding. So they met on the 9th of July. The 14th of August is when the final Senate committee report is to be tabled with Parliament. So when the bill was first discussed, the Parliament sent it to the Senate committee for some consultation and reporting, consultation with the community. I think there was like 4,000 submissions or something like that. But then the Greens, and I think it was just the Greens actually, they did a deal. This is so fascinating. They did a deal which got the report delayed another 3 weeks or something like that. So now it's actually the final report's due on the 14th of August, and they tabled an interim report. And then that interim report, some of the contents of that interim report forced a change to the explanatory memorandum to the bill. And that was only published on the 17th of July. So like last week. So all of this stuff is so live, guys. It was a couple of changes that they were actually able to make an effect with, and we can send you like some summaries and websites and places like that to go and have a bit of a deep dive, because I'm not going to go into that sort of detail. But that's what's happening on the 14th of August. We know about SIL registration. One of the things in the bill is to reduce the claim window for providers to claim to 90 days. So it was set to 2 years in October, and we had a bit of a flurry of people sending us like 2-year-old invoices back then, but now it's 90 days, potentially going to be 90 days. There is some talk in the APR that they've recommended that and this is going to be crazy, but unregistered social and community participation support providers might cop a fee deduction or reduction of 10% on the 1st of January next year. We'll see how that one plays out, because that one's woo. We've got some of this stuff in the bill is actually really, really concerning. And it's all around eligibility and then also reasonable and necessary. So if the timeline goes the way the government would like the timeline to go, what we're looking at is that in February next year, we're looking at rollover plans not rolling over any unspent funding. That's a bit scary, because we've gotten used to rollover plans actually carrying forward any unspent funding. What the conversation now is that it's going to be removed, and they will get a new plan with the original funding that was allocated, but not anything that was left over. And at the moment, I believe that includes any capital supports that haven't been purchased. So that's a bit of a worry. And they're also tightening up on the assessment of reasonable and necessary in all sorts of different ways. And some of it is really, you have to go off and have a read about it, because that is quite concerning if it goes through in the way that it's tabled at the moment. New framework planning is due to commence on the 1st of April. They were supposed to commence new framework planning this year, but have put it off to April next year, and they didn't even have a date to start children. But they're both supposed to be starting on the 1st of April 2027. That's from the 2024 amendment. Expanded mandatory registration for providers of high risk activities like personal care is supposed to be going through on the 1st of July 2027. Then we're looking at commissioning of plan management from the 1st of October 2027. And from our position at Plan Partners, I'd like to take this opportunity to let you all know that we are most definitely still going to be around post October 2027. 2028 is when these new eligibility thresholds, the 1st of January, are proposed to commence. And so that's for all new participants, and then current NDIS participants will be reassessed against these new eligibility thresholds over a 3-year period. So everyone eventually will actually have to be measured against whatever it is that the technical advisory group put forward as the appropriate thresholds and tools. And then the 1st of July 2028 is the proposed commissioning of support coordination. So I know that I've talked heaps, so there's a lot there. There's so much more that every single one of them you could talk about for ages. I'm not going to talk about them anymore. Yeah, just a bit of a run through for you, Amanda.
Yeah, and I'm deciding if I'm going to have a coffee or a tequila, because that is a lot of information.
Have some tequila in your coffee.
But you will get a copy of this. Again, it is recorded, so you will have this to look back on, because that is a lot of information to delve through. And yeah, so what do you think people can look at now from a Plan Partners point of view?
Yeah, I think that, Amanda, again, I'd like to take this opportunity. Plan Partners are committed to providing the best, most up-to-date information. So please do keep an eye on our socials and our website. Also look out for the thought leaders in the community and the NDIS newsletters. Subscribe to those if you're not currently on their, whatever it's called, mail list. Also look out for the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing's website, because it's got lots of information on there, and it does have a really good roadmap if things go through the way they would like them to go through. We've got some great links that we're going to pop into the chat, and that's actually going to lead us really well into this slide, Amanda, about all of the wonderful tools that Plan Partners have. So we are really excited to show you our new website, our tools and our dashboard that reflects our new brand vision. We are no longer green, we are now very pretty blue. Our price guide navigator and budget calculator are known as two of the best free online tools in the sector. We get support coordinators in particular tell us all the time that they share our budget calculator and price guide navigator every day. They wake up with it. They go to bed with it. The price guide navigator is affectionately known as Google for the price schedule, and our budget calculator can help you put together budgets within minutes, Amanda. So that's enough of me talking. So we would like to open this up to some questions that we have received, hopefully in the Q&A. Tash, do you want to pop your camera on and throw some questions at us if you like?
Hi, everybody. I was actually just responding to this one in the chat, but I can probably quickly answer it before I throw a couple of questions to you. So one of the questions in the Q&A is plan managers only seem to want to approve STA from official STA traditional providers, whereas my reading of the guidelines was that a participant could book a caravan park cabin, for example, and use their own support workers during the stay. The traditional providers don't suit our client cohort in psychosocial disability. So nobody will agree more with you in regards to the inconsistencies in plan managers across the field, and I guess what their response would be to this question. However, what I would say, without actually having I guess, visibility of the plan and the detail, is that that is our understanding as well. They would be able to stay in a cabin and bring their own support worker, absolutely. Something else that we offer here is that you would be able to send through a quote with that, and we would be able to review that against the participant, and we would be able to approve that upfront if it was suitable.
Thanks, Tash.
Okay, so how do we invoice ratio, for examples 1:2, 1:3 for STA with the new Priceline item?
This one's for you, Justine.
Amazing. I'm currently holding the hot potato. How wonderful. Salt, please.
Well, there are no ratios anymore.
There's no ratios, but I think that my answer would be you would treat it the way you would treat any split in terms of group attendance or group support. So if you've got a support worker assisting 3 people at respite, then my answer, unless I'm completely wrong, is split the $73 by 3. And have it put in your service agreement. I think that at the end of the day, the support coordinators, participants and nominees understand what the nature of the short-term accommodation is and have the right to say, but hang on a sec, there's, you've got 3 people going on this, if we can still call it respite. You've got 3 people attending. So why is my participant being charged $73 an hour? I think that this stuff, because it's still so new, that is just my understanding from working in plan management. But please prove me wrong in the chat if you've got something that suggests otherwise.
Yeah, that would be my answer as well, because I think if you've got 1 support worker with 3 participants, the ratios and the guidelines are still the same. So that would be my answer as well. Did we have any more questions, Tash?
Just reaching out to the team, there are some definite themes. Also, I will just say that we are sending out this recording and also this presentation after the session today. So everybody that has registered for the webinar will actually get that email to them as well. Any other questions, guys? So I'm just reaching out to Adam and Susanna in the background as well. There are actually a lot of comments, but there's a lot of questions around, I guess, the future and what that looks like, but we just don't have the answers to it, unfortunately, at the moment. But we can pop a couple of additional links into the EDM when we send that out, just so that you can have further clarification on, I guess, on that timeline that Justine showed earlier.
Yeah, I can see that Adam has popped in a comment from someone where it's this other professional decreased to 156.16 an hour. Look, I think because there's a pricing schedule, and depending on the passage of the bill through Parliament, there might still be some ability for peak bodies or organisations, associations to let the minister know what other professional can encompass. I know that I can't speak to the example that we've got in the chat is around a multi-qualified psychotherapist who's, was charging under professional, has just been popped down to 156.16 an hour. personal friend of mine who has an exercise physiologist who went and got a stack more qualifications to be able to deliver immersion therapy. They were charging other professional because of the additional qualifications, and they're registered too. It was actually signed off by the commission. So they were charging $193.99 as well. So I know I haven't spoken to him just yet, but there seems to be, I think there might be an ability for people who are offering these unique, multi-dimensional, multi-qualified supports to impress upon the NDIS and the minister about what other professional truly means and what these qualifications are and why they should probably be at more than the $156.16 price point.
We've probably got time for one more question. And it is, sorry. It's just in regards to, as a service provider, we're having problems claiming funding at the end of every quarter. When the next quarter funding opens, are you able to claim it if it's still within the plan periods?
Amanda.
Currently, this is, look, we're in a changing landscape. So I'm going to say currently, yes. But I would also be saying to work with the support coordinator and the participant, because if you are running out of funding, then you may definitely be over-servicing as well. So the moral of the story is at the moment, yes, it is the case as of today, but as of tomorrow, that could definitely change. So just make sure that you do stay up to date with the guidelines and where everything is and any educational webinars that we have on.
Agree. I think that as a provider, if your participant has run out of funding in their funding period and you have an invoice that you still need paid, reach out to your plan manager, have a conversation. Obviously, they won't be able to share some things, but plan partners do have a fantastic live chat that can answer some of these questions pretty quickly once you've been able to go through the identification process. So I think the moral of the story, again, as Amanda has said, is that we need to all come together and be and support each other in this state of flux that we've always been in it, but this year in particular feels a little bit more like there's stuff coming from everywhere. You know, I think that providers, support coordinators and plan managers, participants and nominees all do need to try and be on the same page, have each other's backs and share information that can better the outcomes of the person with disability. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
So just a reminder that the content today is for educational purposes. Feel free to reach out to one of your state relationship managers or a business relationship manager like myself if you have any questions that are specific to your business needs. We're more than happy to organise an in-depth demonstration of our dashboard and tools and go through each scenario with you. Alternatively, our main details are on the page there and you will get a copy of it. But we are here all the time. So yeah, reach out. There'll also be some links sent through for yours, Mary, who is our amazing guest speaker that we had on today. Are you still there, yours?
She's on mute.
Oh.
If I had $1 every time I have to say I'm on mute, I would be a millionaire.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today and for all the information that you provided. It was very helpful and I think providers will get a lot out of it. Yours, Mary, is on LinkedIn as well, so we will be sharing that link with you. Please reach out, link up with us, and yeah, let's continue this journey together. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. That does conclude our webinar. And yeah, any questions that you have for follow-up, please send them through and we will come back to you. If you enjoyed the webinar today, please use the QR code that's on the screen and leave a Google review. It would be greatly appreciated. For those who are interested in attending future webinars or events, please subscribe to Plan Partners via Eventbrite. In the coming weeks, we'll be sending out a link to the recording of the webinar, so feel free to share it with your team. Thanks so much for joining us and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.